today I kind of wanted to take a little bit of pause from the videos I've made about interviews, kind of dip my toe into talking about applications and schools and that sort of thing. And it's been a really great day so far. I'll insert a clip. Yesterday there was birds chirping. It finally is starting to feel like spring in Dallas, so I'm very excited about that. I have a LaCroix. The vibes are good today, and I'm excited to talk about this, especially because I wish I would have paid more attention to this than I really did applying to schools. So first, let's talk about my experience making my school list and evaluating schools. So I'll be looking to the side a little bit because I have some notes here, so I apologize if that's irritating. So I'll say, even though I did a ton of research and was constantly looking at different programs, their websites and Instagram and the Discord, One Source, which is a great resource for AA material. With all that said, I feel like I took the school list not as seriously as I should have. I had a Notion page that had all of my AA school things, and I called it the AA school plan. And I made some cute collages to decorate this page, and some links which are helpful, which I definitely suggest, and then some important dates, especially for the schools I was interested in applying to, like what dates do the applications open. Next year, the dates might be slightly different, so make sure to do your own research before you apply. I basically just put schools applied to and did a checklist. And I basically, sorry about this, and that's basically what I did. Nothing else to it, really. I didn't add any details about why I wanted to go to school. Didn't add any other details about why I didn't include schools. But I'll say in my head, I looked at the prerequisites and I took the GRE, so I made sure these schools had the GRE, but it wasn't organized and it really wasn't as thought out through as I would have liked. Part of that is because I had confidence that I was gonna get into AA school, and I did not feel like I had to apply to every single school. That was kind of a mistake, because although I did get into AA school, I didn't get the success that I thought I would. I thought I would get a lot more interview invites than I did. I thought I'd get more acceptances than I did. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. I mean, this profession is getting more and more competitive, and I think sometimes it's hard to know what are the expectations, because I feel like there's just not as many matriculant stats. There are a couple of schools that give matriculant stats, but not all. And honestly, I met most of those stats. So I was anticipating to get more traction than I did. And then something to add is this school list that I showed is not complete. Schools that kind of panic applied to were UT Health in July 22nd, which is not I wouldn't say it's a panic applying because it wasn't that late, but their application opened up a good amount before that. So I kind of lump it in because I wasn't initially considering that school. And then I applied to VCOM, which was definitely a panic apply. And I would say definitely a mistake because they have a Southeast regional preference, which I did not have. And I think it's pretty strong, but make sure you're doing your own research to double check. So that was definitely a mistake. And then Nova Denver, I also panic applied on September 8th, and they start in January actually. So they have their applications opened up much before a lot of schools because they start so much earlier. So this was definitely late. I also panic applied to University of New Mexico, and I applied on the 15th of October, which was a lot later than when they opened. And I initially wasn't considering that school. And then there are two schools that I didn't initially consider, but I decided to apply because they opened up their program, and I wanted to make sure I was going to get into AA school, right? Those two schools are SLU, S-L-U, St. Louis University, and Nova Southeastern Orlando, which is a new campus. And I applied to SLU on October 9th and NSU Orlando on the 15th of October. And those I applied to basically a couple days after they had opened their application, so was not late. Next, let's talk about what I did well when evaluating schools and making my list. I don't want to be so negative about myself, so I'm just going to say some things I did well, which is I definitely did my research. I definitely looked into a lot of schools, and I think also something I did well was I did actually apply to a solid amount of programs. I can't remember the total, but I'll put it up there. And I think too, I kept an open mind about where I wanted to live and where I could see myself in the future, which I think also helped. I clarified that my ultimate goal was to get into AA school. And finally, I want to talk about what I wish I would have done better. I would have been a little bit more organized, kind of had a legit, full, complete school list, and then write out, the start date, the location, and then possibly if they require the GRE or the MCAT. And then also too, like, if I didn't want to go to that school, just write a quick description about why I'm not applying to that school. Because I think for VCOM, I had not applied to that school. And then when I was looking back at the school later on, I was like, why didn't I apply to this school? I don't understand. Why didn't I apply? And so I applied. But then I later remembered that they have a Southeast preference that's quite strong. So that's why I didn't originally apply. Unfortunately, I wasted that, money. I mean, it is what it is. But the last thing I wish I would have done was to apply to every school that I was qualified to apply to. And when I say qualified, I mean had the right requirements, like prerequisites, their test requirements, that sort of thing. As I said in the beginning of the video is that I was more confident about my chances of getting interviews and acceptances than what actually happened. Obviously, it's more expensive to apply to more schools, but it is more expensive to have to reapply. Also, just there's the mental stress of it all. I mean, if you're not a very stressed out person, then maybe that's not a factor for you. But for me, the stress of this application cycle was huge. And it was honestly like a very hard time in my life, just emotionally and mentally. So I think applying to every school I could, I think would have definitely served me much more. Okay, now I kind of want to jump into the step-by-step guide that I've kind of created. And I've made some little graphics too that I hope will help as well. First, I think you should make sure you find a complete list of all the schools. And this is going to change from year to year because honestly, so many schools have been popping up. I mean, just in my application cycle, there was NSU, Orlando, and SLU. And then coming up, there's also Kansas City University. And I think it's pronounced Lipscomb University in Nashville. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So those are also opening up, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of others. So this list that I'm going to show is probably going to be incomplete depending on when you're watching this. And then the order of which I'm going to say these is just my preference in doing it, but you can kind of proceed next in any order you want, depending on what you think is important. So I think there's some categories that you need to filter schools with. Also too, if you're an international student, this is gonna be a totally different process. There are a lot less schools that allow international students to apply to their program. And by international students, I mean people that have gone to school in the US, undergrad, but are not permanent residents of the United States. If you have had a long break in between undergrad, is you wanna look at schools that have time limits to their test scores and their prerequisites. If you have recently graduated undergrad, this is not really a concern. Obviously, look at this infographic that I'm putting up from Anesthesia One Source, and I'm gonna include the new university as well. Lipscomb University doesn't have their details yet, so I can't speak on that. But I did put up the Kansas City expectations for time limits. So I would just look at that. And if you have a lot of time in between when you took prereqs, that is definitely going to limit your school list for sure. But sometimes there are exceptions. If you did really well on the MCAT, sometimes schools will let you waive those time limits. But you just want to look at that. Another big thing is if you took the GRE or if you took the MCAT, what schools can you apply to? If you take the MCAT, you're kind of fine. All schools except the MCAT, so you're good. But if you took the GRE like I did, you're gonna be slightly more limited. So for instance, Lipscomb University says that they're gonna only accept the MCAT. And then also for University of Colorado, CU, they only accept the MCAT as well. So that's unfortunate because I went to CU Boulder, grew up in Colorado, and I didn't apply to CU because I didn't want to put myself through the MCAT. So that was really sad, and it's a great program. And then there's actually 2 schools with a voluntary submission of the MCAT or the GRE, which are the Medical College of Wisconsin, MCW, and VCOM universities, their campuses. And then interestingly enough, that new university, Kansas City University, they are going to accept the GRE, the MCAT and the DAT, which is the Dentistry Application Admissions Exam. So that's very interesting. You know, I don't know what to make about that. I'm not sure how helpful that's going to be, but I guess that's a good option if you are also considering the dentistry route and then also considering this AA school route. One note about the MCAT versus the GRE is I would definitely evaluate like what are your strengths as a test taker. I think for me, I kind of just like, oh yeah, I'll take the MCAT because it'll be less expensive and it's a lot faster, which is totally understandable. But I think, and obviously everything worked out, like I got in, it was fine. But my GRE quant score was really a struggle, a huge struggle, because I'm not a math person and I kind of avoided math most of my college career. So it was very, very hard, especially when there's such a big time limit. So I kind of wish I would have taken the MCAT as a more serious option. If I'd had to reapply, honestly, I was going to take the MCAT. So last fall, I did actually register for an MCAT test date in April, but thankfully I got in, so I don't have to do that, thankfully. Okay, another thing to consider is if you're willing to take the Casper exam. So there are only a couple schools that require the Casper exam. That's University of New Mexico, Nova Fort Lauderdale, and the Case Western schools. And I'll check too and put any other schools that require it, if there are more, I should say. I personally took the Casper exam because I was applying to Case and Nova Fort Lauderdale. And honestly, I think if this is like the only point that is kind of maybe stopping you from applying to a school, I would just say do the exam. It's not a particularly enjoyable exam, but I will say it's not a long exam and it's not a terribly expensive exam. And I guess most importantly is you shouldn't have to study a ton of time for it. For me, I took the Casper exam and I got the 3rd quartile, which I was okay with. And I'll say I studied for about a week and then up to like, not all the time, like I wasn't studying that hard. And then 2 days before I was studying quite a lot, like doing practice exams. And unfortunately, I'm not the fastest typer. I don't really have great typing techniques. So I think that was definitely a huge limitation for me. Another slight point is if you took online classes post-COVID. So Case Western requires all prerequisites to be done in person. Obviously, they make the exception to classes taken during COVID because we were all taking classes online. So I heard from people that you could make your case about class you took online. I tried to look at the website, the Case Western Anesthesiologist Assistant Program website, and I cannot find that anywhere for some reason. So I don't know, do your own research, email if you're curious about that. Like if there was maybe one class you took because your school didn't offer it, so you had to take it somewhere else, like I don't know. But I would just email about that. And obviously, super importantly, you need to look at each school's prerequisites. I'm not really gonna put the full details about prerequisites here because that would just be too much and it changes sometimes year to year. Like Emory for this last cycle, the 2024-2025 cycle, had a new requirement for a medical terminology course. Definitely be organized about figuring that out. I know there's some third parties, like I think Anesthesia One Source, that makes updated checklists for prerequisites, but everything can be found on the website, so it's kind of, I don't think, necessary. And one thing to point out about prerequisites is you don't have to have all the prerequisites completed upon submitting your application. So you can have some prerequisites not fulfilled yet, but you have to make sure that you have a plan for fulfilling them by the time you start the program. Also want to look at whether the school is private or public, and then specifically if the school has a regional preference or not. So I made a little list here of all the public versus private, and I also included any information that they stated about their regional preference or if they had no regional preference. It's interesting. I mean, a lot of schools said that they don't have regional preference. So even though they're public schools, so that's good. So for VCOM, they have a Southeast preference. You know, that's probably like a school, if you're not from the Southeast, you should really strongly consider putting your resources in other places. But that's obviously, all these decisions are up to the individual and they know their situation the best. And maybe you have like really strong ties to the area, and that is something to consider as well. And if you're ever confused if you qualify for regional preference or not, or if your strong ties will qualify you as a regional applicant, then just email the programs. I think that's the best thing to do. And then Indiana University, IU, says, IU is a state school, but non-residents are offered acceptances as well. I don't know what to make about that, but I included that quote so you could see that. And then Medical College of Wisconsin, the regional preference was not addressed on their website. Like, I couldn't find anything about it, but they did say that Wisconsin residents make up 87% of their class. So I know the school also accepts international student applications as well. Neomed, which is Northeast Ohio Medical University, I did not find anything addressing regional preference, even though they're a public school, but it's possible it's there and I just missed it. So definitely look at that. University of New Mexico has a Southwest regional preference. University of Colorado, CU, regional preference was not addressed on the website. And then UT Health says, I quote, the MSA program, that's like the AA program, welcomes all applicants that have satisfied the prerequisites listed above. Again, I don't know what to make about that, but I think it's up to you to decide. And then lastly, University of Missouri, UMCK. So I have an interesting quote. It says, equal access to the School of Medicine will be offered to all candidates, regardless of race, sex, religious persuasion, sexual orientation, or national origin, provided they meet the other criteria expressed in the statement of intent. The School of Medicine does not employ a quota system when reviewing and admitting applicants. All applicants are reviewed individually and holistically. So I included this because it said national origin. I don't know. Are they talking about like which state you come from, where your residency is? I don't know. But other than that, I didn't find any other things to address about preferences in state. And obviously with the private universities, it can be guaranteed that they're not going to look at the state residency. And then I want to talk about some other things you should consider. So, and these are more like personal about you. Ask yourself, like, what is the goal of this cycle? Is your goal to get into AA school this cycle? Or is your goal to get into a specific region? Or is your goal to get into one specific program because maybe your family is from Atlanta and you need to be in Atlanta? I don't know, and you just need to make sure that you clarify what the goal is. Because when you're making a list, and let's say you don't get into Emory and you wanted to stay in Atlanta because you have a young family, but let's say you get into some other schools that you had on your list, such as University of New Mexico, and you don't want to go to those schools and you have no intention of going. So I think it's important to clarify, like, really what do you want, and if you're okay with having to reapply. So for me, my goal was to get into AA school and I didn't want to reapply. I wanted to start school and I didn't mind if I was in Florida. I didn't mind if I was in Texas. So I applied to a lot of schools. I mean, as I said, I wish I would apply to more schools. I think that's all I want to say for this video. Yeah, making a school list can be both fun, exciting, and nerve-wracking. I hope that this video can make it slightly easier and kind of give you more direction and more details about how to make the school list. I hope spring has started for all you guys and wherever you live. I know it is here in Dallas. So enjoy the outside, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye guys.